What's up, everyone? Good morning and welcome to Shaw Locals Bears Insider Podcast. I am Kyle Nabors along with Sean Hammond and Hub Arkush. The guys have been out at Halas Hall on Friday and Saturday for Bears rookie minicamp. It's now Monday morning, May 8th. Sean, what's up?
Yeah, we got to see the rookies run around in shorts and no pads. So you know what? It's a first impression. It's hard to read a lot into it, but it was good to be back out there, and certainly we had some nice weather for it too.
Yeah, Hub, I'm not gonna lie, rookie minicamp is not exactly the most exciting time as a reporter, but it is nice to be back on a sideline and see guys even in shells like that and get to see some new faces. What was it like out there for you this weekend?
Well, you don't learn a whole lot. We can't really pretend we saw him play any football, but you get to see body types. You get to see a little bit of athleticism on some of them. You do get to see speed, and some of the things that they do, at least with the receivers and the running backs. And you get to see the coaches go back to work, which I found kind of interesting. And we did get a chance to talk to most of the coaches, pretty much all the coaches. And get their thoughts about their new players or how they hope to work with them or how they hope to build their group. And so, there definitely is value to the rookie mini camps, but to pretend that we now know that so-and-so is a starter or this fifth round pick was a steal or that type of thing, we don't really know a whole lot more than we knew before they drafted him.
Thank you, everyone who's joining us live this morning on YouTube and Facebook. If you're on YouTube, do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment to help people find the show. If you're on Facebook as well, you can leave a thumbs up. Whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can drop a comment in here. We're streaming live like always. We will try and get to some comments and questions as we go along today. And the kind of idea of the today's show and throughout the offseason, we'll keep these a bit shorter until we get to training camp. Not a ton of news to talk about, as we get into the off season here, but we will be with you pretty much once a week until we hit training camp. I'm sure we'll take a little time off as we all try and get away and unplug a little bit here. But Hub, as you were mentioning, it was a nice chance to catch up with coaches, and it's the first time you've talking to some of these positional coaches since what, January. They've now had a chance to go back and review everything from 2022, and it's not like they're coming out and giving you their full review, but I'm sure that their perspective and outlook has changed a bit since January, right?
Yeah, I think you could say that. You get to some of the off-season events as we go from the end of the Super Bowl until the beginning of the draft, and you can bump into a coach in the parking lot or in the building when you're there, but you don't really ask them anything about football. You just say, "Hi, how you doing? How you been? How's your off-season gone?" Here we're asking about scheme again. You're asking about specific players again, and also I don't know what Sean would say about this, but I it just felt to me like they were more confident, like they're maybe a little better prepared for the season. Like now they're the Bears coaches. They've got a season under their belt. Now they're rebuilding. Now they get to do what what I think they like the most is really attempt to improve their position or their group. If you're talking about a coordinator, I found particularly some of the conversations about special teams interesting, and so. In that regard, you see how they're growing as a unit, as a group. Right now, it's quiet, it's easy, it's work, it's football stuff. But at some point, they're going to have to, deal with the reality of 3-14. Of having been the worst team in the league. They know that there's pressure to improve. I hope they understand, or at least I hope there isn't a ton of pressure. Nobody thinks they're going to be a playoff team this year. I hope. Not that it wouldn't be nice if it happened, but it would be pretty unusual. And so you get a sense of what they really feel they need to accomplish. You get to ask them about a specific player to the extent that they're not going to say anything negative about their players, but they can tell you some of the players that maybe they're a little more excited about. Sometimes just in answering questions, they say things that specify a certain guy that you weren't expecting. So it was very good in that regard, and I get a sense that this coaching staff is a pretty good group together. They seem to like working together. They seem to be close. They seem to all be on the same page. And this is really, to me, more Matt Eberflus's team than it was at the start of last year. Again, I missed most of the season, but I was still there as we were doing this a year ago. And they were all just getting to know each other and to get to know the system, the new system. They now know Eberflus's schemes, Luke Getzey's schemes, on offense, and I think that they're starting to get a little more comfortable with him, just like the players.
Yeah, Hub, I would agree with what you said about this coaching staff. I mean, I know some of these guys, especially on the defensive side, had worked together before, but you definitely can see that they have a good mojo going together. They do seem more confident, and they should be more confident. You're bringing in a lot of talent. They have a lot of young guys who they have high expectations for. I like that you mentioned special teams, because Richard Hightower is always fun to talk to, the special teams coordinator, and man, he was pumped up, and he should be. I mean, this is his time to shine. This is when he should be, working his hardest, is looking at these rookies. And a lot of these guys are going to have to, if they're going to make the roster, they're going to have to contribute on special teams. And we talked with him a lot about Roschon Johnson, the running back from Texas, and all the different things he can do on special teams. Tyler Scott was out there fielding some punts, and I think it's an often overlooked part of the game, and it's something that these rookies know that they're going to have to get onto the field that way. Roschon Johnson might wind up being a stud running back here in Chicago in the next couple of years, but this year, right now, he's back on the depth chart, and he's going to have to make his way up there. On kickoff, on kick return, and in those aspects of the game.
You heard after the draft and again this weekend, a lot of praise for Roschon Johnson, not just his on-field ability, but really his mentality. You guys had a chance to visit with him. Did you kind of get that impression, Sean?
He is, like, in interviews, he's a very mature guy who, he says all the right things. I don't think, I think Tyler Scott's my favorite interview out of these rookies, because he, he's up there telling stories, and I love that. As somebody who's doing interviews and writing stories, that's great. Roschon Johnson is like, you can see the maturity, and you can also see that he doesn't want to say, he's not going to come out here and make any proclamations. He's just trying to find his roster spot. And you like that about him. He's all business, and you can see that, from right off the bat.
What else was interesting to me about Roschon Johnson is when you hear a running back is 6 foot, 219 pounds, you think, wow, that's a big running back. But then when you see him and just watching him on the field, even though they're not doing all that much, he's a big guy. He almost looks more like a linebacker than a running back. And then listening when we were talking about special teams, it's pretty unusual for a running back, unless they happen to be a kick returner, to be a factor on special teams. But they talked a lot about his ability in all assets of special teams. In kick coverage, they didn't talk about him as a returner. I don't think that's going to be his fit. But I did get the sense that they expect him to make an impact this year, even if it's on special teams and playing some at wide receiver. But I think that they're pretty pumped about him, and I got to be honest, when they took him in the 4th round, I was surprised. I just thought that's too high, maybe 5th round, maybe even 6th round. And yet to hear them talk about him, it's almost like they feel they stole him, that they've really got, a good player here. And it wasn't just special teams. Even Matt on Eberflus on Friday talked about him a little bit. So I think they feel good about their running back group. You look at what they did. You've got a kid who led the NFL in average yards per carry. You've got a veteran from Carolina who rushed for 900 yards last year, and now you've got a new guy who they like a lot. So I think they feel. Plus, with the way that Justin Fields can run the ball and the way they ran last year, that was something that kind of kept coming back. I think that obviously they've got to improve the passing game and work with Fields. But I think they're kind of pumped about the running game. And at the end of the day, Matt Eberflus, he's a defensive coach. He's got his own special defensive scheme. And all defensive coaches are going to want to be able to focus on the running game as well. And so I didn't think about it so much prior to meeting with these guys. But I do think now that, much like defensive tackle was a big part of the building of the defense, I think this running back room is very important to them with improving this year.
And I know we're saying that it's hard to read much into rookie minicamp when you're not in pads, and obviously they can't hit. But Johnson certainly looks the part, and I think that's kind of what you were saying, Hub. You know, Richard Hightower actually used those exact words too. He looks like a linebacker out there on special teams, and yeah, he's a big guy, looks the part, and you know, you can't read too much into rookie minicamp, but you can get a sense for who's big and who's not, and he is a big physical guy and looks like he you know, is going to be a really good football player for the Bears.
And just to add to that, Kyle, when Richard said that, you know, that he was talking about the way he covers on special teams, the way he tackles, the way he hits, you know, and so I know that at least Hightower is thinking about him more as a football player than a running back, and it's just that is unusual when you're talking about a running back.
I agree with Hub. I really like the stable of running backs the Bears have put together here. You know, I think you guys know at this point, I've been carrying around a Donta Foreman flag for probably about 3 seasons. I just wanted the kid to stay on the field, and finally been able to do that. I really like the talent of that kid, but you know, overall, in terms of this conversation, I know it's rookie minicamp, so it kind of lends itself to talking special teams, but you know, it's easy to overlook special teams, but when you're building an NFL football team or any football team, it's obviously an incredible component of your team. But we've had to, the last year or so, we've been so focused on the rebuild, and they've been so barren in terms of depth. You know, we've been talking about who's starting out in your offensive line and trying to figure out your starting wide receiver and stuff. But you're starting to see, I think here, legitimate depth within this organization as they're starting to rebuild this out here.
You know, guys, it's going to be an interesting season for me because you know all too well, you've probably gotten tired of hearing it from me, but I know everybody good enough to join us on these live streams has been hearing it too. I think Bijan Robinson is the best football player out of this draft. I think he's going to be the rookie of the year. On one mock draft, I had the Bears taking him at 9. And all anybody's been talking about for the last 3-4 months is the disqualification or the lack of interest in running backs. And now the Bears turn around and draft Bijan Robinson's backup, you know, and then, you know, everybody thought I was nuts when I thought the Bears would take him at 9 because of the lack of interest in running backs in the draft these days. And he goes at number 8. And now I'm almost wondering, obviously, if they were watching Roschon, then they were looking at Bijan Robinson too. And I can't lose the fact or the thought, gee, if he had lasted one more pick, would they have not made the trade and take him? But what we have learned is they've got a guy that they really like. They've got some depth again with the people that they already had. And I think it's going to be a big part of the offense this year. And I think it should be. Anybody who thinks just because running backs have been devalued in the draft that the running game isn't important in the NFL, that's nuts. I mean, you know, you look at all the top teams in the playoffs. You look, the Chiefs weren't as good as the Eagles, but you look at how they run a football. If you want to win Super Bowls, you got to have a running game. You know, you can't just fix your quarterback, and we don't know yet, you know, how far they're going to get with Justin Fields. But I do feel like they really, you know, address that room, both free agency and draft, and it's a Bears thing too. I mean, you know, I've been doing this a long time, but anybody who's a Bears fan knows it's a defensive football team. It's running back famous, you know, and so the fact that they have improved that area, I think is kind of a fun thing to look forward to for this season. And, you know, I'm fine if they rush for 200 yards a game and win that way, you know, as opposed to throwing for them, as long as they win.
There's a couple of things, Sean, before I'll let you answer that, because I want to throw this out to the chat because this is something I can't think of offhand. But Hub, as you were saying, anyone who's been paying attention knows that you love Bijan Robinson. I want to throw this out though to the chat. Who is a player that the Bears passed on that you had fear that come September and October that you were going to be regretting it? Because, you know, it happens. I picked Bijan Robinson going for about 150 in week 3 and Hub just going and putting his hand on his head like that. But anyone throw some names out there. I'm interested to see what kind of responses we get to that. And the other thing there, Sean, that I wanted to say, Hub, you were talking about Kansas City having a good running game and Philly. I completely missed until this weekend, guys, the DeAndre Swift trade that had happened. Was it? I think it was on the Saturday of the draft. It must have happened. Yeah. I missed that. But that's a fun running back stable out there in Philly now because I like Rashad Penny, kid that hasn't been able to stay on the field all that often. DeAndre Swift. obviously a high draft pick, has had trouble staying on the field too. There's I feel like a 50-50 chance both of those guys end up on injured reserve, but there's also a chance that those guys stay healthy. Man, that's a fun backfield, Sean.
Yeah, well, that's why you need 3 or 4 good quality running backs, and I think the Bears, after drafting Johnson, I think they feel pretty good about the depth they have there. If one of those guys, one of those starters, Khalil Herbert or Dante Foreman goes down, Johnson could be a guy who steps in there and contributes for your offense. And it's that's the way it is in the NFL these days. You need multiple of those. We talk about that a lot with the defensive line and shifting guys around in there. Running back is more so because these guys get injured. Like you're saying, Kyle, one or both of those guys is probably going to wind up on IR at some point. And so the Bears have to look at it that way when you're assembling a running back group. And, you look at what the Bears did last year, even before Justin started running like crazy. I mean, there was a significant emphasis on that run game, and it didn't always work. They didn't quite have the pieces on the O-line that maybe they wanted. Obviously, you had David Montgomery back there, and that's changed, but they were still trying to run the football. And I don't think that's not going to change. I don't think their offense is going to change drastically just because they have a few more weapons in those receiver spots.
I'm happy you brought up the way the evolution of this offense, though, because you had a chance to talk with Luke Getsy, and going back to last season, and there was a stretch that first, what do you say, Sean? Probably 4 or 5 games where the Bears were setting the NFL back in terms of passing game and their yardage. It was hilariously low. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't close. It was like 130 yards, and the next was like 160. It was, I want to say, maybe an Atlanta Falcons team. I can't remember off top of my head, but you saw the Bears shift their offensive philosophy. Like I said, probably about 5 to 6 weeks in, and it seemed to click more for Luke Getsy, Sean. Did you get that sense from talking to him this weekend? And where do you think he goes in year 2? Does he feel more confident?
Well, I certainly think that he's going to continue to lean into the strengths of his roster. And you saw that in the way that they utilized Justin more. They got him moving laterally a bit more the second half of that season. And there were more design runs, but, he was also a lot more confident scrambling. And those two things combined helped him become what he did at the end of last season when he was running for all those yards. And, Luke Getsy is going to play into those strengths. He knows what Justin Fields can and can't do. At the same time, I do still believe that there's this is a Matt Eberflus football team, and we talked about that a lot during the season last year in terms of like decisions to go or not go on 4th down and running the ball in certain situations. I still think Matt Eberflus wants to lean on that defense and be conservative in some situations. I wouldn't expect this Bears team to come out and start throwing the football around like crazy just because they added a DJ Moore. I think it's still going to be somewhat similar to what we saw last year in terms of what they want to do.
Guys, I think that's Matt Eberflus's, that's how he grew in the business. Most of these defensive coaches are going to run first and throw second. They have to learn how to become head coaches who have great passing games, who throw the football, but they're never going to give up on the running game. And I think the better the defense is, the quicker it gets off the field, the more he's going to try and run the football to stay on the field, and it's also, when you think about, have you ever had a conversation or done an interview with Matt and not heard him talk about getting physical and the hits principle? Well, where do you get physical? You get physical in the running game. You don't get physical in the passing game. And he's a physical football coach. And so I don't think there's any dispute or can be any argument that the running game is very important to him.
And I think it should be, particularly, we certainly don't want to make it sound like just because they're probably going to be a run-heavy team that this is going to be a vanilla or slow-paced offense. I expect it to be a fairly up-tempo offense. When you have not just the running backs that they have this zone scheme that they want to run, but of course when you add in an incredible athlete like Justin Fields, why not be a run-first team? I expect them to be the type of team that is run heavy, but is using that outside perimeter speed with Mooney and DJ Moore to kind of stretch defenses, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can look at the tape and see what they did in late October and in November before all their receivers got hurt. And don't overthink it. This is what was working with Justin. Do more of that. And you can't obviously come out and run the same exact stuff. Teams have been studying you for the last however many months, and that's going to be a challenge in itself. How the rest of the league adjusts to Justin Fields. We see that all the time with young quarterbacks who come out and have a really good season. Defenses make adjustments, but if I'm Luke Getsy, I'm circling those 5 or 6, however many weeks it was when things were really rolling on offense, and I'm saying this is what we want our offense to look like. And now you throw in a DJ Moore. It's just going to be that much more dangerous. You throw in a Robert Tonyan, you have a second tight end who you feel really good about. And, they just added a Darnell Wright, who's a guy who looks like a pretty elite run blocker at that right tackle spot. At least he was in college. And you can feel good about what you're going to be able to produce in that running game and in that offense.
Kyle, I didn't answer your questions before because, I'm just honest about it. My memory still sucks, guys. And I knew who I was thinking about, and I had to find his name, and I found it, fortunately. And you've heard it before, but we all knew that the Bears' greatest need was edge rusher. I'm sure at some point it'll come up again today. They didn't draft a single edge rusher. They didn't sign a single edge rusher, not a pure specialist. One of my favorite guys, kind of the number 2 guy in the group, a name that I knew it was USC. I just couldn't remember the name. And it's a little hard to pronounce, but Tui Piloto was the edge rusher from USC. He was first team All-American. I believe he had 13 sacks this year or this past season. And when the Bears took Stevenson in the second round, the next pick off the board was Tui Piloto. And if there's one guy that I think the Bears are going to regret not taking, not instead of Stevenson. I like Stevenson. I'm not criticizing that pick, but that's the guy that I knew they were going to have to get him in the second round. So that happened to me twice. Bijan Robinson goes the pick before their first round pick, and Tui Tuipulotu goes the pick after their second round pick, or one of their second round picks. But that's a name to remember, guys, because I think he's going to be a big time NFL pass rusher.
I like that you brought that up because it made an easy way for me to drop this in. If you go over to shawlocal.com, actually, I'll throw that into the chat right now if you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook. There you go. If you're watching with us, or if not, go find that later at shawlocal.com. Sean actually put together a list of 5 free agent edge rushers that are still out there. I think a lot of names are these names: Frank Clark, Yannick Ngakoue, not names that are surprising. A guy that I knew was out there, but I was a little surprised. I just want to bring it up quickly. Justin Houston, who spent the last couple of years in Baltimore. I didn't realize Justin Houston, now 34 years old, but 9.5 sacks last year, Sean. Still being productive.
Yeah, he's still getting to the quarterback. And, I had 5 edge rushers on that list. You can go read about each one of them. I think several of them have flaws in terms of like why it probably wouldn't work out with the Bears. Frank Clark is a guy who probably wants a multi-year deal. You could throw Yannick Ngakoue in that same conversation. But Justin Houston is one that on paper seems to make sense. I don't think he would, he's a guy who's going to sign a 1-year deal, most likely. He's a guy who's played in Matt Eberflus's system, and yeah, he was still productive last year. Is he an elite pass rusher? No, but if you're just looking for somebody to suit up for you next season, and then maybe they can find a more long-term answer in the draft next year at that edge rusher spot or in free agency next year, Justin Houston makes a lot of sense in some ways.
Guys, the one that I've had my eye on is Yannick Ngakoue because he's only 28. I don't nothing against Houston. I just don't want any 54-year-old or 34 for that matter. 34-year-old.
Yeah. It feels like Justin Houston's been around that long.
Yeah, no, but Ngakoue, the thing I can't understand, and I'm almost sure I have this right. He's been with 4 different teams in the last 5 years, and he's a pretty good pass rusher. He gets 8-9 sacks a year, but when you see something like that, a guy who can't stick with a team, you ask yourself why. What's going on there? What's the issue? But if there is one guy still out there who could be a really good fit for what they really need, I think it's Ngakoue, and I hope that they're at least looking and considering and doing their homework. I'm sure they've done their homework But that is another, just, giving folks names to keep an eye on and think about. He's still on the street, and he can rush the passer. That there's no question about.
Derek Carter in the chat saying they just signed one. Derek, Sean, I don't know if you've seen anything. I haven't had social media up since we've been on here, so I don't know if there's breaking news, or Derek, if there's someone that you're referring to, throw that in the chat and let us know. Derek also had something earlier when we were talking about competition. I'm trying to find that now here. I dropped that link in and lost my place here. Sean, do you see what I'm talking about? Derek had put up some positions here that he felt were I think the competition here is at running back, defensive line, offensive line, and defensive backs. Sean, you think that's a pretty fair analysis of where the Bears are at?
Yeah, I would certainly agree with defensive line. I mean, those jobs are, obviously, Justin Jones is maybe the only guy who's certain to be a starter. Those jobs are up for grabs. You would expect Justin Jones and DeMarcus Walker and Travis Gibson to wind up being your starters along there. But maybe one of the rookie defensive tackles can challenge for a starting job there. Certainly they're going to be in the rotation. Defensive back is another one that I'm really interested in. You throw Tyreek Stevenson into the mix. I thought all the DBs that they brought in looked good. Kendall Williamson, the safety, 7th round safety, Terrell from Minnesota was another one who looked good over the weekend. It's hard to say. The quarterback play wasn't great. That made it hard to really get a good read on the receivers that were out there. But I thought all those DBs looked like they were confident out there and they were playing with some swagger. And that's going to be a fun competition. Certainly for those 4th and 5th DB spots. I think those top 3 are pretty locked up.
Sean, as they go through this rebuild, I think where the most talent is right now, young talent, is in the secondary. Mm-hmm. I think you've got talent for all 4 starters. We know we can name 3 of the starters right now, but you've got talent at all 4 positions now with what they've added this year, this draft at safety. And I think some of them could be pretty good football players. I think that by midseason this year, that secondary may be making a lot of plays. They've got an interesting group of talent competing in the secondary, and I think that'll be the most fun to watch during the preseason and early in the season.
Sean, I'm not sure. Cornelius checking in here. I'm not sure. Did you mention Justin Jones there as to be a starter?
I mean, Alan Williams flat out said, he's our 3 technique.
That's what, I know Alan Williams said that yesterday, which
obviously everyone's got to compete for jobs. I should include Justin when I say that, but I'm just saying, like, on paper, as we're looking at it now, I would be shocked if Justin Jones isn't a starter on a defensive line in week 1.
Guys, if the way this works is going the first full day of training camp, the starters are the guys who finished the last game of the season as a starter.
Yeah.
Until somebody beats them out, that's what the depth chart is going to look like. Now they may, they're going to plug in Darnell Carty, right tackle. They're going to plug in a few things, but for the most part, until they start hitting each other, and until they start hitting somebody else, until they play those preseason games, you just don't, you don't know that. That's why we keep talking about the competition.
Derek checking back in after Edge, unrestricted. Undrafted rookie free agent Anthony Jones.
Yeah, they made a couple of moves this morning. They released a couple of the UDFAs and added a couple more. They did add him.
I mean, I appreciate you responding, Derek, but that's not what we're talking about. They're not looking at an undrafted guy as someone who's going to be able to compete and help them in 2023. Now, maybe the kid can, but that's a big if, a very big if when you're talking about an undrafted rookie free agent compared to some of the veteran guys out there at the edge rusher position. And I think this is a good time here to transition over the last 15 minutes or so, which was the title card for this video, which is, I know it's only early May, but we are starting to get to the point now where we have a pretty good idea of what these rosters are going to look like around the NFL when we come to week 1. We're going to get some cuts. We're going to get some surprises. And obviously you're going to get injuries. But I think for the first time, we can start to say what our expectations are for 2023 a little bit. And I guess I'll start off the discussion a little bit. I know we had, even before the show started, a couple longtime listeners in here. Mark Mark Kozak saying, I would like to see 8 wins as a goal for the Bears. Rick Gonzalez had posted in there saying that he thought that was reasonable. And I thought the number I had put on it, talking to some friends over the weekend, was I thought 7 to 10. 10 on the very high end if things went well. I thought 7 to 8, but 7 to 10 seems to be a good range to me, Hub.
Well, it would be quite an improvement, obviously, and therefore would mean that they've had a good off season in how they've improved their talent. I think what we'll get to now is a little more work on just how bad they really were last year, because I keep saying it, and I think it probably ticks people off when I say it. But at 3-14 with the number 1 overall draft pick, they were the worst team in the NFL. But I can think of 4 games right off the top of my head that were as close to being wins as losses. And so now all of a sudden you're closer to 7 wins right there. And so to think that it could happen is certainly realistic. I think 10 is too aggressive. I think if they get to 6-7 wins, I think 8 wins, that used to be a 500 season. Now it's, 1 game short, but nonetheless, that would be, quite an accomplishment. And quite frankly, there's probably 3 or 4, if you look at last season, there's probably 3 or 4 wins that come as simply as how much does Justin Fields improve? Can he make those plays in the fourth quarter that he wasn't able to make last year? So it's not unrealistic by any means. On the other hand, if they do only win 6 games or 7 games, but they're playing well, and we see players that we're excited about, we think are close to really arriving, I don't think you should be too disappointed. Anybody who thinks this isn't going to take at least 1 more year is really just kidding themselves.
Sean, how about you?
Well, I'm not much of a sports gambler. You guys know this. We talk about this every once in a while. And I had to look up what the Bears over under is, and it feels spot on at 7.5, 7.5 wins. I think if the Bears only win 6 games next year, I think you'd be disappointed. I don't know if this is going to be. I would be surprised if things would be going really well if this is a 10-win football team. I think that 7, 8, 9 win range is where you should be looking. I feel like that would be obviously a big improvement from last year. It matters too what things look like. Are they in games again? Can they win 7 games and still have a couple of close losses like they did last year? Maybe turn a few of those into wins. I don't expect this to be one of the worst teams in the league like it was last year. They've just added, too many good pieces, DJ Moore especially, and you're feeling good about where they are on the offensive line now, or at least better than you were a year ago. I just feel like this is going to be a team that could be in the playoff hunt late in the year in terms of a wild card spot, but I wouldn't bet on them making the postseason.
I like this comment from Chicago Sun-Times veteran beat writer Mark Potsy saying, whether it's 7, 8, 9, or 10, any win total has to include wins against playoff teams this year. I think that's a really good point, Hub.
It's an excellent point. And also to Karen, who just texted, they can win 10 games. They can actually win 17 games. But I mean, what we're trying to talk about here is what is a realistic hope. And I think Potsy is pointing out that that's what Matt Eberflus is thinking. That's what Ryan Poles are thinking, is can they play with good teams? Can they win meaningful games? They're going to win, I would think, 4 or 5 games in their own division, because it's a bad division, and they're not the worst team in that group anymore. I don't think, we'll see.
I mean, to me, if they win 4 or 5 games in the division, they're probably a playoff team, right?
They got a pretty favorable schedule outside the division. I mean, obviously we're months before the season, and this is all on paper, but
I also don't think 4 or 5 wins in the division is outlandish either. I mean, Hub is completely correct.
I
agree. It is a bad division.
Yeah, that's all. I think all I said was they could win 4 or 5 games in the division.
I'm not saying that. You said they will win 4 or 5 games.
And that gets you halfway there. Guys, I'm not lower on Justin Fields than other people. I'm just more cautious. I just keep going back to the tape and watching what happened last year. And he has a long way to go as an NFL passer, as the guy who makes those plays in the passing game in the fourth quarter that win football games. And until we start to see that happening, predicting any more than 3 wins, may be unrealistic. I haven't really figured out yet. We're all going to have to make a prediction before the first game of the season. We'll say this is what the Bears are going to be. I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't see them competing for a playoff spot this year. They have. We keep talking about Justin Fields. We talk about DJ Moore. We talk about they've improved the running game. They didn't add a single pass rusher. That was their biggest problem, so there is still work to do, folks. That's all. And, if they're going to win games, they can't only sack the quarterback 20 times this year. To me, and maybe I'm the only one, this is more about at which position do they start to develop players who have a chance to eventually go to a Pro Bowl, or at least be very good players who can make plays and win games for you. They didn't have that last year. And we don't know yet if they have any more this year, but they've added some people who have, I shouldn't say that. Yes, they have added, they've added at linebacker. They're better in some spots for sure, but how much better? I can't wait to get to training camp and see these guys start hitting each other, and then we'll start to have an idea.
Shaw local digital editor John Solly popping in here with, if the Bears come out of 2023 feeling how the Lions came out of 2022, that would be a hugely successful season. You're already shaking your head. Yeah, that you agree.
Yeah, I mean, most people are talking about the Lions as possibly the team to win the division this year, in part because everybody thinks the Vikings were a fantasy, and they weren't. That they were a pretty good football team. They got lucky with some things. They've got to get better. I think they're still probably the preseason favorite to win the division, but the Lions were the team coming on the most in the second half of the season last year. And that's what frustrated me with the Bears, is the Bears were getting worse in the second half, and that can't happen. They got to be getting better. The Lions were. I think a lot of people think the Lions will be improved. Dave Wannstedt and I spent a good part of the past week having fun debating, not arguing about it. But he thinks the Lions have vastly improved themselves. I think the Lions did some really good things on day 2 and day 3. I do not understand at all what they did in the first round. They had. And I'm not saying that Gibbs and the linebacker, won't be really good football players, but they didn't have to be drafted that high. And I always worry about teams that overdraft just because they have fallen in love with somebody. But, if the Vikings are contenders again and the Lions take a step forward, suddenly this division could be pretty good. And we're not talking about the Packers, not just because they're the Packers and we're Bears people, but they weren't that far off of 500 last year either. So it was a bad division at the end of the season, especially with the Vikings getting upset in the first round of the playoffs. But the whole division could turn. It's not just the Bears.
Yeah, look, the Lions went 9-8 last year, and if the Bears go 9-8 this year, and you got Justin Fields, and you're feeling good about that, I think there's going to be a lot of optimism heading into the offseason, and you can feel really good about where this organization is heading, because if you're winning 9, 10 games, whatever it is, Justin Fields probably playing pretty well, and I feel like if that's the case, you're going to be in a good situation. I do agree. I kind of think, the Vikings might fall back down to earth a little bit, but I still think they're the favorite in the division. It's going to be an interesting one. I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of those divisions where, everybody goes 3-3 against each other or something like that, because it seems like it's going to be some good competition in there for all these teams.
I would add one thing to that, Sean, is the Lions were playing, some very good football games late in the season last year. And for the Lions, 9-8 was exciting and impressive. But if they haven't improved that defense, they won't win 9 games this year. I mean, that was a really bad defense. And they made some commitment to it in the draft. But, it's like the Bears with the edge rushing situation. If that defense doesn't get better in Detroit, that team's not going to get better.
My problem with Detroit is going to continue to be that Jared Goff just is such a limited ceiling. Like I feel like at some point, this is just dumb to say because he did get him to a Super Bowl, but like I feel like Jared Goff is going to find a way to lose the Detroit Lions an important game at some point. Is that does that mean to say, is that unrealistic? I guess, how do you guys view Jared Goff? Is he is he a guy that you feel comfortable building around if you're the Detroit Lions? I know this is completely off the Bears. I really don't know what to make of the Lions, I guess, because
You
of that.
know, I guess I have to, I'm probably not going to answer the question, but the way I will answer it, there are 32 starting quarterbacks in the National Football League. 4 or 5 of them have the ability to be franchise quarterbacks. You know, it's the other 28 that everybody's looking for. Jared Goff is not one of those 4 or 5. He's not the worst quarterback in the league either. He's another one of these guys who's a starter who's trying to get to that level and has shown nothing yet to suggest that he's going to get there. Is kind of the best way I can describe it. Now, that said, you can be a playoff team with that guy. You can even win a playoff game with that guy. You've got other great players, but you're not going to win a division conference title. You know, you're not going to go to the Super Bowl. You know, that doesn't happen.
I mean, that's kind of how particularly in the NFC, the way it's set up right now, like I see the Detroit Lions being a playoff team and then a real team like like Philly, a team that I expect to really kind of tower over the rest of the NFC. Like I could see like Detroit in a second round matchup just getting punched in the face by Philly and, down 3 touchdowns and Jared Goff give the ball away a couple times. I kind of feel like that is the ceiling for Detroit as currently constructed.
Guys, look at the Vikings. Do they have their franchise quarterback? I mean, they were one of the surprise teams in the league last year, and then they went to the playoffs, and in the first round, they crapped the bed. I mean, that's 20 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and those aren't the guys that you're going to win Super Bowls with.
I do. I mean, if you surround Jared Goff with talent, he can throw the football and he can win you games. I don't think he's going to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback necessarily, but I mean, this is a guy who's won a lot of games as a starting quarterback in the NFL. And I understand why the Lions have not overreacted in terms of trying to find a young quarterback. They got a guy who's throwing the football around and can keep you in games, you can win games with. Obviously, I think they want to find somebody who's going to be a long-term answer. But I also understand surrounding, making much like Ryan Poles has said, you have to rebuild this whole football team. It's not just about one position. And I think that's what the Lions have done a pretty good job of doing. We'll see how this last draft plays out with some of these decisions they made. But I have no problem with them sticking with Jared Goff for another season. But yes, if the Bears and the Lions have the same record next year, you're going to feel a lot better about the Bears and Justin Fields than you are about the Lions with Jared Goff.
Is it inappropriate to say crap the bed on a live stream? I apologize if I offended anybody. It just occurred to me afterwards. I think that's okay, but I'm sorry.
No, there have been much worse things said on a YouTube live stream, I'm sure.
So. Yeah, I would think so.
But it's more of a larger, a bigger picture thing than like even just the 2023 season, Sean, what I was kind of getting at there. And it kind of brings it back to the Justin Fields discussion, right? And about what ultimately this year is going to come down to, because like Jared Goff got the Rams to the Super Bowl and they still felt the need to go out and make a big move to get Matthew Stafford to upgrade the quarterback around a nucleus that they had really mortgaged their future around the rest of it. Now the Bears aren't in that position because they're rebuilding, but what I guess I'm trying to say is at the end of the day, and Hub, you continue to harp on this with the Bears having the 2 first-round picks, but like you really want to see Justin Fields take off this year, because if it's middle of the road, if you don't see the progression in the passing game, even if the Bears do improve to 9-8, yeah, you're going to continue down the road. This is all going to play out. So don't take this out of context. Please don't say I'm trying to bash Justin Fields, because I'm about as high on him as anyone can be. But what I'm saying, that if you don't get the ceiling year, if you get what Hub is concerned about, the passing game doesn't, you start getting into the Daniel Jones territory where you're wondering, do we pay this kid or not? And that ultimately, despite everything we've talked about, is what this comes down to, Hub.
Yeah, fortunately for them, I mean, if they see some things they love and some things they're really worried about, they've still got another year before they have to worry about paying them. But at the end of the day, it's more about when you're in the position to get the next guy. And what they did was they knew that they had 2 cracks at it. They could do it this year if one of those 4 quarterbacks was going to be a franchise guy. I completely agree with them and that I didn't see that in any of the top quarterbacks in this draft. I do think Anthony Richardson has a chance to be, and I think he was the best one in the group. And the fact that he was the third one chosen tells you, how people who know more about it than me felt about it. But I would not have, I certainly wouldn't have kept that number one pick and taken a quarterback with Justin to work with for one more year. He showed more than enough to want to see another year. And I think that the way they handled it was perfect, because I do believe that probably the Panthers pick and their pick are going to be top 10 picks again next year. And now if you've got two top 10 picks to work with, now everything I've heard is that there's going to be at least two and maybe three quarterbacks this coming season, next year, that all will be rated higher than the top four were this year, that it's going to be a better group next year. So it may be really hard to get into number one or number two to get one of those guys, but at least they've got the assets to try if they want to. And I think that was very smart. And what about the flip side of it? What if Justin Fields does become your guy? Now you've got those two top 10 picks to get two edge rushers, or to get an edge rusher and get another, tight end or whatever position you want, another defensive tackle. So either way, I think they've made maximum value over what they got last year as their gift for having the worst record in the league.
Sean, how about you there?
Yeah, I mean, they're set up in position to get whatever the heck they want next year in that first round with those two first round picks. I'm always cautious when we're talking about the draft a year from now. Obviously, Caleb Williams looks really, really talented at USC, but I certainly haven't done watched enough film on some of those other quarterbacks to know exactly how many of these guys are going to be better than some of the guys we saw this year. I tend to pump the brakes on that. I feel like we're saying almost every year that the quarterbacks are better next year, and so I approach that cautiously. But yeah, I mean, they're going to have an opportunity to add a really good edge rusher if that's what they want to do. If Justin plays well and they're in position to keep moving forward with him at the quarterback spot, they can attack this roster in other ways. Going way back to your question, Kyle, about guys that the Bears missed out, that we were upset the Bears missed out on. And it's not necessarily guys they missed out on, but I think if Ryan Poles, obviously, you go with Darnell Wright in that first round, and that's fine. That's a good pick. I think if Ryan Poles really wanted to address that edge rusher spot, he would have had to trade up into that second round, into those first couple of picks for an Isaiah Foskey or a Derek Hall. I think those guys have the potential to be really, really good pass rushers. And so, they decided not to do that. And that's okay, given the salary cap space you have next year and the high level draft picks you have next year. But yeah, that's, that is a hole on this roster. And if the Bears can't get after the quarterback, they're not going to win 10 games. They're not going to win 8-9 games. They're going to, if they aren't vastly improved in that area, it's going to be a struggle for this defense.
They could have also just taken Tui Tupolata, but
they could have taken
they didn't.
So. Yeah.
I think I got the chat talking with the Justin Fields stuff there. I'm trying to figure out where to even go with it, though. This is really something like we're going to be talking about all summer, because like anytime, like I see like frequent guest here, Daniel Jones is not better than Justin Fields. T3P podcast. I'm not saying that he is. It's more about, is Justin Fields showing enough or going to show enough to pay him at the type of
year?
Yeah, because when you it's when you decide to do that, it's going to completely alter your roster construction when you start kicking in that type of cat pips. And that's what we're talking about. Are you willing to make that commitment and not pay someone else? I think that I'm very confident that you're going to see enough out of Justin Fields that this isn't really going to be a topic of conversation come December. But right now, anyone who tells you that I can be confident But there's an absolute possibility that this does not go how I think it's going to go. And if it doesn't, if it is middle of the road or mediocre, it is going to be a conversation that's happening a lot around Chicago and around the National Football League.
You know, guys, at some point, Bears fans have to get serious about being real about the Justin Fields conversation. The simple fact is, with the worst passing game in the NFL last year, every starting quarterback in the league was better than Justin Fields last year. I mean, that's just the way it is.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
I get the
who won fewer games.
Well, I wouldn't say
I'm not blaming Justin. I'm trying to make the point here, guys, is that you can't just evaluate it that you're excited because he had this incredible year running the football. But that's really all he did last year. He may be the best running quarterback in the NFL.
But that's the way the league is moving, though. You know,
well, that's the way it moved last year. You know, I'm sure in another year or two it'll start to turn back the other way. But my point is, just because you try and be honest about where you're at right now doesn't mean you're anti-Justin Fields or pro-Justin Fields. You're trying to analyze the situation. And what matters about Justin Fields, and guys, you can all do it. I'm not talking to Kyle and Sean. I'm talking to everybody listening right now. Go watch the tape. Go watch the second half of almost every game they played. Go watch when the play was there to be made to win the game and he didn't make it. He doesn't see the football field. He doesn't find the place to throw. He doesn't find the right place to throw, and he doesn't always get the ball to the right place the way that a franchise quarterback does. It takes some time to develop that at the NFL level. He's only got one full year as a starting quarterback. He has shown the arm strength and the character and the ability and all the things you want to see. It could very well happen this year, but where they're at right now is he has not shown it yet. It's not that he hasn't done it yet. He hasn't shown it yet. And so to say that you're set, you know, and you're excited, and let's take care of everything else, that's just not realistic, because this is the hardest position, maybe in all of sports, certainly in the NFL, to develop at. And that's what he's got to do this year.
I agree with what you're saying, Hub. I mean, you have to look at this Justin Fields situation through an objective lens. I just don't agree that his running the football doesn't matter or shouldn't take effect or it shouldn't be a part of that conversation, because that's a huge weapon that he has. And so you can't just look at the passing stuff. You got to look at the tape and look at, you know, the entire football player.
Well, and let's be clear, I don't think you were saying that I was saying that his running the football doesn't matter, because I've said the opposite. But I mean, you know, it's not enough is the point. And when we do these live streams and I see what a lot of folks are saying, and there are some people who are, let's just skip the rest of his career and put him in the Hall of Fame. You know, I mean, I'm just saying, be realistic about where he's at right now and where your favorite team is at that position, because they haven't answered the question yet. And by the way, Ryan Poles told us that. He said this is the year. He said he's confident. You know, he thinks he's got the guy. I hope he's right. I think there's a chance that he is right. But he also has made it clear they haven't decided yet. They don't know yet. And that's what they've got to see this year. And you know what? It doesn't mean that if he doesn't go to the Pro Bowl that you get rid of him at the end of the year and get somebody else. But if he doesn't take a big step forward, if he doesn't start seeing the things that I'm talking about and making plays when he sees them, you know, and being successful at that, then I think you have to start to be pretty concerned.
T3P podcast had put a comment in there earlier about Lamar Jackson. I believe it said that his high passing was 3,100 yards. And if Justin Fields was a guy that was throwing for 3,100 yards, 3,500 yards, and running the way he does, yeah, he's a guy you're going to be paying as a franchise quarterback. The thing there that is a calculus that I think is overlooked here, like, they did just pay Lamar Jackson, right? That large amount of money, but he's coming off of back-to-back years where he's missed time, 12 games the last 2 years. Like, that is another calculus of this. Okay, so yeah, I think Justin Fields has a higher ceiling than Lamar Jackson ever has as a passer. First off, I'll say that. But let's say the accuracy does end up at, in the same range as Lamar Jackson. It's still like, we've already seen Justin Fields get nicked up here multiple times running the ball. Like, that is something when you're trying to put a dollar amount on this and talking about, I think Justin Fields has the potential to be the best rushing quarterback this league has ever seen. Like, he is a special athlete. I also think that there's enough of a sample size now that you have to worry about that if he continues to do it at this rate, he's going to continue to get banged up.
Well, Kyle, that's the mixed bag you're playing with, and that's why I just made the comment a couple minutes ago. Yes, I know what's happened with running quarterbacks this year. May even continue in 23, but it's not going to last forever, because that's one of the things that happens with running quarterbacks. They can't stay healthy, and anybody who does it as often as he did it this year is increasing that risk. And I will guarantee you that one of the things the Bears are working at right now, and will be working at in training camp and going into the season, is to have him run less. They hope that he runs as well as he does, often enough to make a difference in certain games, but they don't want him running as much as he did this year, because look at how it ended with him not playing the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season, the most important time of the year.
Run smarter too. Get down, find ways to get out of some of the big hits that he was taking.
It's another really good point, because some of those runs that turned into, 13 or 17 or 21-yard runs might have turned into 30-yard or 40-yard passes if he just held the ball a little bit longer. And that's a big part of what I'm talking about seeing the field and understanding how to play the position. And that's what they're going to be working on all offseason. He certainly has shown the character and the intelligence to be able to learn it if it can be taught. But I'm not sure anybody has ever proven that it can be taught. I think it is highly likely at this point that Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and a few of these other guys were born that way, that they see things on the football field that the other guys with the same talent as them just never, develop the ability to see. And that's what you're looking for in Justin Fields.
I think this all goes back to sort of what we were talking about earlier, and this is why they've sort of retooled that running back spot and brought in some different guys and drafted a running back in Roschon Johnson. You don't want Justin running that much. Justin was very clear about that at the end of last year when we were talking with him about potentially setting the single season record, and he flat out said, I don't want to run for 1,000 yards in the future, because he knows that he's got to throw the football. And yes, you can still use those legs as a weapon. But yeah, you don't want to be doing it as much as he did last season.
Guys, I think that the place to be as realistic as possible. I've been doing this for 46 years now. And in every one of those 46 years, we've had this conversation. The Bears have never found their franchise quarterback. That's how hard it is. Again, I'm not criticizing. I'm not saying it won't happen this year. What I'm saying is that it's really, really difficult. 27, 29 of the 32 teams are all having the same conversation. Is their guy the guy? And you have not yet seen enough in Justin Fields to know if he is or he isn't. But what you've seen is some unique traits. And we keep hearing, Matt and Ryan talk about traits. And I know that is important. You got to have them. If you don't have them, you're not going to get there. But that's the conversation we should be having if we're trying to determine, do we really think this is going to work out or not? And I don't think it's going to take all season. I think by week 5, by week 6, by week 7, we don't see him starting to make some of those plays late in games, then there's a chance that it may not happen, but that's what you're looking for this season. And obviously, if you're a Bears fan, that's what you're hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, I don't know about you, but I expect between another offseason for Justin, another offseason with this coaching staff, and then the upgrades that they've made to this offense, at least my personal expectation is I think this should be a pretty dynamic offense right out of the gate. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that they're going to be high scoring, that it's going to be incredibly efficient, but it should look like a modern day NFL offense with some fun wrinkles to it, is what I guess I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should be able to score points. We saw that in stretches last year when they were playing well and when they were healthy. There's no reason that they can't do that again. I would be much more concerned about that defensive line. And, obviously they made some upgrades at linebacker, so you can feel good about that. And we mentioned way towards the beginning that we felt good about the secondary. But that defensive line is a big weak spot on this team. So this is a whole, everybody plays a part in whether you win or lose. I do think the Bears are going to be scoring points. I feel fairly confident about that. I don't know if that's necessarily going to mean that they're winning games.
Yeah, Kyle, and the one thing that I would be careful with a fast start from the offense is that I like the way they've addressed the offensive line, but it's also going to take the longest. That's not going to happen week 1, week 3, week 5. You got a second-year left tackle and a right tackle who's never played a game. I like them. I think they've made the right moves, but I think that's going to take a little while. So I'm not sure I see an immediate burst from the offense.
And we all know that in the NFL, injuries are half the story. You lose one of those starting tackles, and you're going to feel a lot worse about where this team is offensively.
I said that at the beginning of the show that we'd probably be keeping these in the off season to about 45 minutes, and then I got into Justin Fields about the 45-minute talk, and here we are. So we will get out of here pretty soon, but I want to quickly. I can't see where the question was. Someone had mentioned last year about Justin Fields and the lack of calls that he was getting on late hits. Sean, do you think now that we have a full season of Justin Fields where refs are going to maybe officiate him a bit different this year?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I think those are bang bang plays, and it's probably going to continue to be a 50-50 thing. It's going to depend on what the ref calls in the moment. I don't necessarily think they're going to officiate any different, just because he was in a lot of those situations last year.
I don't know. I don't know if it's when I say that, I guess I'm saying I have to. You heard from the Bears coaching staff multiple times last year that they were pretty upset that he wasn't getting those calls. I have to imagine that they've made that very clear.
Oh, I'm sure they've made that clear.
Very clear to the league office. And I'm just like the officials are human beings, right? Like you yell in their ear enough, it is going to sit in there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I do wonder if we see a few more calls in Justin Fields go his way this year.
I mean, it's also going to depend how much he is running. They talk about wanting him to run less. He's never going to stop running. That's the way he plays the game. And he's so athletic, and you know what? He can get out there in space, and he slides really well. We talked about that back during his rookie season about his baseball experience sliding, and maybe that's part of it in that he's I don't know. I don't want to say sliding late, but he's always trying to gain extra yards, especially on third down. He's talked about that. His job is to get the first down. And so he's always going to be put in those situations if he keeps playing that style. Whether that's right or wrong for the referees to be calling these penalties or not. I think it's always going to be a case where there's going to be some he gets and some he doesn't, unfortunately.
Guys, I missed a big chunk of the season, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that the injury that cost him the end of the season happened on a pass rush, actually, when he got hit. And, at the end of the day, you can try and protect him as much as you want, and he definitely takes greater risks the more he runs, or the team takes greater risks letting their quarterback run as much as they do. But at the end of the day, you're going to get hurt in the NFL no matter what position you're playing. And I don't think there's a lot that the officials are going to change or that they're going to do different that is going to protect him more. It gets back to him being more instinctful about how he plays the position and knowing where he is protecting himself and knowing where he's taking greater risks. And you know what? If he's going to be a winner, he's going to have to take risks. You don't want the guy to be afraid to run. That's not the answer either. But at the end of the day, what we know is that running quarterbacks tend to get hurt more often than guys who don't. And so it has to be a part of the the evaluation or the way you monitor this in the hopes that he stays healthy and starts to develop more.
I try not to throw like negative comments up here very often, because particularly if someone's like, you don't know what you're talking about, because they're probably right. I don't know what I'm talking about half the time, but I do got to throw this one up here from Karen, Karen, first off, really do appreciate you joining the show. I think it's the first time I've seen your name popping in the chat, so I don't want to discourage it, but what she said, start supporting Field. The media here is so negative. I have to say this one, like, it is not our job to support the team. It's our job to try and be objective and bring you the news and our analysis, particularly from Hub and Sean, who are out there at Halas Hall. That is our job. It is not to be cheerleaders of the team, and that should never be your view of news media. Because if that's how you think news media works, you're always going to have a bad view of news media.
And if I could add, Karen, being honest isn't being negative. And I know what I've said, and I've listened very carefully to what Sean and Kyle have said, and we haven't been negative in any way about Justin Fields. As a matter of fact, we've pointed out that he has some great traits. He is not a developed NFL quarterback yet. I'm sorry if you don't like that fact, but that is the fact. And our job is to analyze what he's doing, how he's playing the game, and what his chances are of succeeding. And I think all three of us have agreed he's got an excellent chance of being a very good quarterback, but he's not there yet. And telling the truth about that isn't being negative.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get out of here on that note. But thank you, everyone who joined us, including Karen. Please do come back. Like I said, don't want to chase you away. We really appreciate it, guy. One more time, go to shawlocal.com. We're going to have a lot of content coming your way this week. Thank you again, everyone who joined us live on Facebook and YouTube. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment again. It really does help other people find the channel. It's great to see. Just to know that we're not out here talking to ourselves. So once again, thank you for everyone who joined us this morning. For Sean, Hammond, and Hub Arkush, I am Kyle Nabors. We'll be back with you guys soon. Everyone have a great week.